You're in the bathroom right now, or you will be in the next few hours. You'll close the door, you'll be alone, nobody will see you, nobody will hear you. It's the most private moment of your day, and you have it 3 or 4 times. For a Viking on a longship, this moment didn't exist. There were no doors, there were no walls, there were no rooms, just you, 60 other men, and the open sea in every direction. So how did Vikings have privacy on a longship? The short answer is they didn't. The long answer is they invented something else entirely. Let's start with the reality. A Viking longship was roughly 100 feet long and 12 feet wide. That's it. That's the entire world for weeks or months at a time. The largest known longship, the Roskilde 2 found in Denmark, carried 60 to 70 men. The Roskilde Viking Ship Museum built a full-scale reconstruction of it in 2004 called the Sea Stallion and sailed it from Denmark to Dublin and back in 2007. The crew of that voyage said the same thing every Viking would have said 1,000 years earlier. There is no privacy. There never was. There never could be. The ship had no cabins, no bunks, no interior walls of any kind. Crew members sat on rowing benches that doubled as storage chests for their personal belongings. When they slept on those same benches or on the open deck, wrapped in their own wool cloaks. When they ate next to each other. When they argued, everyone heard it. When they prayed to Thor before a storm, the man next to them heard every word. And the bathroom situation? They went over the side, or into a bucket near the mast, with 60 witnesses. So how did they handle this? Anthropologists who have studied closed system societies like submarine crews and Antarctic researchers have identified the same patterns the Vikings would have used. There are 3 of them. The first strategy is rank-based separation. On a longship, the chieftain or captain often got a slightly elevated platform at the stern. It wasn't a room, it wasn't really privacy, but it was a recognised space where you didn't go unless you were called. The same way modern people don't sit in someone's reserved chair at a meeting. Physical separation didn't exist. Social separation did. The second strategy is the cloak. A Viking's wool cloak wasn't just clothing. It was his blanket, his pillow, his rain cover, his shroud if he died at sea, and his privacy. When a man pulled his cloak over his head, he was sending a signal. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't dead. He was somewhere else. He had pulled himself out of the social space. The other men would lower their voices. They would step around him. They would not speak to him until the cloak came down. This is what anthropologists call a civil inattention boundary. A signal that says, I am here, in body, but not in conversation. The cloak was the door. The third strategy is the loudest one. Singing. This is something the Sea Stallion crew rediscovered on their modern voyage. When 60 men are packed into a 100-foot space for weeks, the only way to keep the peace is to share a single sound. Vikings sang while they rowed. They sang while they sailed. They sang in mead halls and they sang on the deck. The sagas describe rowing songs called drapur, used to coordinate the strokes. But the songs did something else too. They turned every man's individual thoughts into the group's single voice. When everyone's singing, nobody is alone with their head. And nobody's intruding on anyone else's mind either. Because there are no private minds while the song is going. But here's where it gets interesting. Privacy as a concept might not have mattered to them the way it matters to us. In Old Norse, there's no exact word for privacy. The closest concepts are einvera, which means being alone, and lorn, which means secret or hidden. But einvera was not a positive word. To be alone, away from the group, was a curse. The sagas use it to describe outlaws, exiles, and men marked for death. A man who wanted to be alone was a man who was about to be hunted, killed, or buried. For a Viking, solitude wasn't peace, it was punishment. The most feared sentence in Norse law was outlawry, called skoganga, literally going to the forest. It meant you were declared not a person. Anyone could kill you, no one could shelter you. You had to leave the community and live alone in the woods or the wilderness. Most outlaws died within a year. They didn't die from cold or hunger. They died from being alone. Now let's talk about intimacy, because everyone wonders about this. Viking ships carried no women on raids. But longships sailed for trade and settlement too, with families on board. Couples on the Nard trade ships had no private space to themselves. The same rules applied. Darkness, distance, and intentional ignorance. Everyone pretended not to see, everyone pretended not to hear. The same social protocol modern humans use in a crowded subway or a tent, shared with siblings on a camping trip. So how did Vikings sleep with 60 men breathing on top of them? They slept the way every human did before the modern era. They slept in a pile. Body heat was survival. The North Sea at night was lethal. A man who tried to sleep alone away from the others might die before dawn from cold or roll into the sea. So when did this change? The same answer as everywhere else: walls. As Viking settlements grew into towns like Birka and Hedeby, longhouses became larger. Wealthy families built partitions inside their homes. By the Christian conversion in the 11th century, the church had begun teaching that privacy of conscience, the private confession, the private prayer, was a virtue. Solitude stopped being a curse and became a sacrament, but it took centuries for this to spread. Even in medieval Scandinavia, peasants slept in one room with their entire family and their livestock. The idea that a single human could have a single space, alone, with the door closed, didn't really exist until industrial era housing. Here's the part that's hard for modern people to understand. Vikings might not have wanted privacy the way we do. A Viking's identity was the crew, the boat, the oath you swore to the men beside you. When you stood on a longship deck, you were not an individual having a personal experience. You were a piece of the ship. Your strength was the crew's strength. Your fear was the crew's fear. To pull away from the group, even mentally, was to weaken the whole thing. Today, we have the opposite problem. We have all the privacy we want. We have rooms nobody enters. We have phones nobody else touches. We have entire days where we never speak to another human being. And we're more anxious, more depressed and more isolated than any humans who ever lived. So here's the answer. Vikings had privacy through ritual, signal, and song. They created invisible walls using cloaks, codes of inattention, and the shared sound of 60 voices singing the same words at once. They didn't need to be alone because their sense of self was different from ours. They were not a person in a body, they were a body in a crew. And when their world got walls, they kept their boats anyway, their songs anyway, their crews anyway. It took Christianity and 1,000 years of urbanization to teach their descendants to want a closed door. For 60 Vikings on a longship, every breath was shared, every fear was public, every song was sung in one voice. Then we built doors, and we've been singing alone ever since.